Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your long curly-haired host David, and today let's talk about the validity of elections in Australia. We've recently had an election, and so there are a bunch of comments saying it was rigged. The whole thing was a sham and they made us use pencils so they could rub out the votes and replace them with the exact same ones that they wanted. So, are elections in Australia rigged? No. Obviously not. It's incredibly difficult to do that, and we actually have one of the best electoral systems in the world. And this is where I've already immediately lost a bunch of you who don't want to listen to how I'm actually going to explain this because you've already made your mind up. But if you genuinely are interested to learn why Australian elections have several layers of security and scrutiny to prevent or detect wrongdoing, then hey, this is for you. If you're the kind of person that thinks that elections in Australia are riggable or dodgy, I want you to give this a genuine attempt to actually get through this episode and listen to what I'm trying to explain. At no point am I going to call anyone who thinks an election is rigged an idiot. That's not what I'm here for. I want to actually explain to you how things work. So for starters, the AEC is independent of the government. The Electoral Commission is not controlled by the government. It has one purpose, and that is to maintain an impartial electoral system. Not every country in the world has an independent electoral commission, but we do, so 5 points to us. The comments I see claiming fault in an election are very often people taking their personal dislike of the government and then blaming the AEC for how the general public voted. Any opinion that you may have about the government, whether positive or negative, is an entirely separate thing to the AEC and how it runs as an apolitical body, okay? To be clear, you are allowed to dislike the election results. Like every election, there are plenty of people who wish for a different result. That's just democracy. We always have a plurality of views, and that's okay, as long as we respectfully disagree. I'm not here to debate or challenge anyone's political views. I don't care how you voted, but I just need to point out that being unhappy with a result is an opinion, and claiming the result was rigged is a serious legal claim that you need evidence to make, which you can do, by the way. I will explain later in the episode how you can challenge an election in the courts, but before we do that, let's talk about ballot security. Everyone's favourite thing. How do we make sure that voting is secure? Well, at all given points in time between printing, transport, issuing, voting, sorting, counting, movement and storage of ballots, well, all the papers are tracked, secured and accounted for. Every container for ballot papers is given 2 unique seals to detect if it's been tampered with. At no point are ballots left with a single individual, so they can be observed at all times by multiple people. Multiple officers are involved in the sign-off of the packaging and receipt of materials. The list goes on and on. Ballots are also counted twice by different people to be verified. Senate ballots are electronically scanned, but also manually verified by human beings to spot any kind of error. And on top of this, an independent audit is done of any electronic data collected to check for accuracy. And also, really importantly, it's not just the AEC looking at this. Scrutineers can be appointed by any candidate to observe the process alongside the impartial and independent staff from the AEC. The AEC has its regular staff, but also then hires about 100,000 temporary workers at elections to deal with the massive amounts of manual counting of millions of votes and millions of preferences. And then on top of this are the scrutineers on behalf of those candidates who get to watch, but not touch, what happens, and those scrutineers can raise challenges if they wish. Some people falsely claim that pencils are used so votes can be erased and altered. A, pencils are just convenient to provide and work reliably under more conditions than pens. B, you can use a pen. C, erasing pencil still shows evidence of tampering, so it isn't a foolproof way of rigging anything. And D, there's absolutely no way people could be altering any votes, let alone thousands, while being observed by several people every second of the process, while also under intense time pressure and being the central focus of the entire nation's media for hours on end. The count is updated live, so people at each counting area can verify that the information published is what they saw themselves. Again, those observers are a mixture of independent and impartial employees of the AEC, as well as people on behalf of basically every single political party and some independent candidates. So coalition scrutineers can make sure that the vote isn't being altered to benefit Labour and vice versa. Minor party scrutineers do the same. For the idea that vote tampering is possible, we need to imagine that like every single One Nation, Family First, Trumpet of Patriots, Fusion, Independent, People First, Greens and Socialist Alliance appointed scrutineers, and all the other political parties as well, all around the country in every single polling booth, all huddled together as like 10,000 little groups, and they all go every single election to go, hey gang, we disagree with each other on every single thing imaginable, but let's agree to collude together to observe the count and rig it so we all lose. Got it? Yeah. That just isn't logical on any level. That doesn't work in a practical way. So to begin with, the government is not involved in the counting process. And also the counting process is being observed by thousands of people who are politically aligned against the government. And yet somehow, the Prime Minister who's not in the room gets to pull all the strings. That's not how it works. You can start to see how incredibly not realistic this claim is. But hey, I bet someone's going to claim that they've seen evidence of ballots being erased because, well, there was a video circulating recently that claimed to show an AEC polling official rubbing out and altering votes. There's a few problems with this claim, starting with the fact that the video was from the New South Wales state election, which isn't run by the AEC. That's a different electoral commission. On top of this, that wasn't a ballot in the video. It was paperwork to do with the running of the polling place. So the only so-called evidence I've ever been shown claiming that ballot tampering for federal elections happens is a video that wasn't for a federal election, wasn't about a ballot, and wasn't even tampering. Every single word of the claim is fiction. Okay. What about voter fraud though? What if the ballots are wrong before they're even being counted? Now it is true that we don't use voter ID in Australia, but that's also because it's not necessary. The AEC has multiple ways to detect if someone has voted more than once, and can also detect that the overall rate of people voting more than once, either unintentionally or deliberately, you know, not all of it is actually malicious, but they can determine that, well, the overall, it's just incredibly rare in Australia. Like, it's negligible. There has never been any recorded amount of voter fraud high enough to impact the outcome of a federal election in Australian history ever. Not to reveal all the secrets, but one of the things that the AEC does is check the electoral roll. You know, you go to a booth and you like get your name ticked off. Well, if it's been ticked off more than once, they can see that there's a duplicate, they can contact people who have been ticked off more than once and try and gain more information. And they can also then refer those people to the Australian Federal Police for further investigation. And if they do actually discover rates of fraud, well, those people can face up to a year in jail, as well as a very hefty fine. Most of the time, when people vote multiple times, it's people who are like drunk, elderly, have low literacy, and are just unsure what they're doing. Only a handful of people are referred to the AFP, and almost no one is prosecuted for voter fraud because it's literally not a problem in Australia. Whenever they tally up how many people cast potentially multiple votes in any given electorate, they've yet to have any seat have enough fraudulent votes to impact the outcome. Again, not a problem. But if there is a problem, the count can be challenged. At any point during the count before declaration of the official results, any candidate may request a recount of some or all of the ballot papers, which can be done if the race is close. Ballots are also stored after the election, so if there is any court challenge after the result is announced, they can be re-examined. Again, they do count and double check all these ballots, so if there is an issue in the recount, an election can be overturned. It's happened. I'm not saying that every single election has been perfectly managed 100% because human error happens, but we know when there has been a problem because of all the scrutiny and double checking that elections have to go through to ensure transparency and integrity. Being able to detect human error is proof of a good system not a rigged system. In 1995, for the Queensland state election, the seat of Muddingborough was won by 16 votes, but it was challenged because 22 overseas military ballots didn't arrive. Because it was so close, it was possible those missing ballots could have changed the outcome, and so a by-election was held. This by-election led to the downfall of the incumbent Labor government. They would have won a majority of one seat had the result not been challenged. Well, if only they thought to rig it so they could stay in government. Oops. Well. Now, if there is an issue with an election result, it can be taken to the High Court, acting as the Court of Disputed Returns. And the thing is, any person who is qualified to vote in an election can challenge the result of that election. You just need 2 witnesses and you can petition the court and provide what grounds you have for disputing the results up to 40 days after the return of the writs. So if you don't know, when an election is called, they do this thing called issuing a writ. A writ is both the authority to hold an election, but also to declare a successful candidate. The return of writs to the Governor-General for a federal election must be done within 100 days of when it was issued. So basically, if you think the election was dodgy in any way, you still have a couple of months after election night to bring any evidence you have to a court to start a case. So if 3 people out of the over 18 million people enrolled to vote can bring some kind of evidence of dodgy or illegal behavior to the Court of Disputed Returns, go for it. The court will then look at it and decide if there's any reason to investigate further and if the claim of illegal activity has any potential merit. Or if it's just made up and can easily be dismissed. Like if you're like, hey, look, it's this video of New South Wales, and they're like, that's not even a ballot in the video. Dismissed. So I don't actually think anyone who thinks elections have been rigged is still here, but if you genuinely believe the election, any election, was rigged, find proof. I want our elections to be legitimate, just like everyone else. And one of the most important forms of oversight to ensure that is making sure people can raise valid concerns in the courts. If you successfully prove there was any wrongdoing and we have to go to a fresh by-election for any seat, then you are a hero, and I will be incredibly grateful for your service to ensuring the integrity of Australian democracy. So my challenge to every single person commenting, it was rigged, is to actually, fix it. Prove it. And hey, if you think that the courts are corrupt and rigged too, and it's impossible to prove anything, and it's all a lie, and democracy isn't real, then, oh my goodness, what a depressing world you think you live in. I know the comments are going to call people who believe in election conspiracies like idiots or stupid, but let's take a moment to have some sympathy for these people. Can you imagine how isolating and frustrating it'd be to think everything is rigged and democracy is a lie? No wonder these people are so angry all the time. That sucks. That idea of the world that they've imagined or tricked into believing is such a sad life to lead. That just sucks. So, hey, if you still think that elections are rigged and you made it this far, I want to congratulate you on the good faith work you've done to actually listen to me. My plea to you is to consider what sources of information you're taking in, who is telling you that it's rigged, and turn your skepticism and doubt back onto them. What proof do they have of these claims? You're already questioning authority. Why not question the authority of those who claim that it's rigged, okay? Best of luck. So, in conclusion, right? The AEC is independent from the government. We have so much scrutiny. We have a ton of security. We have all sorts of kind of measures to prevent and detect fraud. And we also have the independent law courts to ensure that any kind of wrongdoing can be brought to the attention of the court by the public and issue new elections if necessary. And that, in conclusion, is one of the many reasons why Australia is one of the best ranked democracies in the world. The Economist Democracy Index puts us at number 11 in the whole world. We used to be number 14 recently, we went up. We have a remarkably high vote turnout, we have an incredibly transparent and independent election process, and we should be proud of the democratic institutions that Australia has created. But there is one thing we shouldn't be proud of, and that's the fact that New Zealand is ranked higher than us because they've got better democratic participation by the general public. Aussies, let's get patriotic. Let's have that fuel us into a competitive spirit, not just for the rugby, but for democracy, okay? Let's f***ing beat the Kiwis by learning more about how democracy works, learning more about how the parliamentary system works, and participating and engaging in our democratic institutions, not just at elections, but in between them as well. And that's what I'm here to help you do. So many people tell me I didn't learn anything about how politics works in school. That's why this exists. That's what Auspol Explained is all about. I want to help you understand how the Australian political system works better, regardless of who you vote for or your political views. I don't care who you voted for. I want to make sure you know how it all works. So thank you if you've managed to get to the very end of this. Don't forget to share, subscribe, comment down below something that you don't understand about Australia's parliament, but you'd like to know, and well, I'll try and help you out. And of course, thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon. That's all from me. I'll see you next time.